Let's go. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this reactor slash impact supporter live. We are today with Jonas from the Footprint firm, his partner at this VC firm. And I'm Jerome as a reactor, but Jonas is also now the head of Impact Supporter, a media that he recently bought. To give a little bit of background, the Footprint firms backs European climate innovation from lab to market, pairing capital with corporates and policy know-how. Basically focusing on the Nordics, but wherever in Europe where there is a market. Glad to have you here, Jonas.
Thanks.
Cool.
Thanks. Great.
You recently took over Impact Supporter, and I was a friend of August who had it before, and I'm glad it was the torch was taken over. Why has that move been strategical for you and strategically smarter than just starting your own voice on the internet?
Yeah, that's a great question, and thanks, Jerome, for having me here. I'm so delighted to join you here. Look, that's clearly something we considered. It was on my mind. I went on, August podcast on impact supporters, and I followed it closely, and really loved what he had built, and felt such a strong alignment. You can say impact supporters is already this really cool international community of like-minded people and voices. And us being able to continue that just felt right somehow. And I think if what we wanted at Footprint Firm was to brand ourselves maximum or tell our own story constantly, then we should have probably started something on our own. But this was much more appealing to us because for us, everything is about making sustainable change possible. And for that, you need a conversation, not a broadcasting, so to speak. And so this made great sense for us.
And did you have a surprise that you didn't expect before from taking over? Like you knew it was great, but maybe there was something like the cherry on top that you really liked.
No, I mean, I think it's a really vibrant community, and I get a lot of responses from people, really positive ones. For me, the cherry on top, I am also a slightly humble person, and I'm not an experienced podcaster. So the cherry on top for me is that the sort of listeners and readers didn't drop off sharply when August left, but that the community has stayed with us, and all I care about in this is really to give bring good stories and good conversations to people, and hopefully grow the community. August founded it to attract capital, you can say, to the green transition, and that's really deeply connected with what we do. So I'm just a humble servant to carry that mission forward. But that was great for me. But like switching to you, maybe Jerome, you've also narrowed Reactor to focus like more purely on deep climate tech. Why are you drawing that line now, and how has that sort of changed your audience?
Yeah. Let's say, director is like 3 years old, and I have a background in aerospace, so I still had this like strong deep tech, and not really linked to impact, but impact was always been in my heart and it's been for a while. And sometimes those two were conflicting because you got all those defense companies that are, close to space where I used to work. And it was hard to draw the line. I love the tech. I love the impacts, and sometimes it was blurry because I could interview somebody who was like, obviously polluting the planet. So where do I stand regarding to that? Do I want to have that voice on my channel? And I needed a decision, and the media was growing, and the climate was growing, where the deep tech was, clearly fading away. The fact that also this year, and we'll talk about later, is I feel like the deep tech, climate tech, so both deep climate tech, what I call, is getting stronger. Like all these energy companies, hardware company, cooling company, and they are like doing something great that has both financial returns and impact. So I really like it was aligned with my conviction. And when I made that choice, I refused some opportunities for sure, but I said let's be niche first, and then we can expand. But also, even in the future, if somebody has like really no climate and sustainability at heart when starting a company, I wouldn't follow it. Like there is too much to do to continue polluting. That was my feeling.
Has it changed your audience, do you feel? Also, it must have to some extent.
Yeah. Yeah, a little bit more. It was mainly American. Honestly, it was like 40% back in a year ago, Now it's more balanced where we have like one third almost is Indian. Surprisingly, yeah, now the top country is like 20-25% is Indian, 20% still US. And then you get a rise, where the US was like hammering the rest of the audience. It was like just a few percent for the rest. Now we have like have a growing German and UK audience that wasn't there before. So maybe it's because of that change that I'm also able to attract more the European who have like new climate tech and impact mindset and sustainability, and maybe made more sense to them. And I understand why the deep tech aspect attracted the US. They are strong in deep tech, and we are not like deep tech entrepreneurship. We are strong in tech in Europe, but in really deep tech entrepreneurship, Musk is always the reference. Those kind of Jeff Bezos. I felt like it was male in the US that was watching my video. So yeah, it's good. The balance is good now. It's more. I feel like I don't rely on one audience. It's surprising about the Indians, so it's pretty cool, actually. But yeah, it shows that there is a trend, and the numbers don't decrease. Like actually, the number increased.
Is
So
that
that was
right?
yeah. So it's maybe it's clearer. Like Jerome is a climate tech media. Boom, that's it.
I think Tim Ferriss went on 20 VC with Harry Steppings, and he was talking about this. You should only think about your 1,000 super dedicated listeners, and then the rest will follow. And I think that's just such an insightful comment, because I really think that's just true. If you're trying to be a little something for everyone, then you're just not really that relevant. But if you really focus in on being relevant for someone, then all of a sudden it's actually relevant for a very broad audience, even people outside of that core sphere.
That's a good transition to my next question for you. As AI is booming. Everybody says climate tech is gone and the hype is over. We have said the opposite. I am also turning to that. I agree with you. But what evidence do you have, and do you see that it's just the beginning?
Yeah. I mean, these days, clearly Bill Gates and I seem to not fully agree on this one. So we're at odds, and I do want to say though, I think Bill Gates has been grossly misquoted in this essay. I actually don't think it's as stark as what he's been quoted many places saying. I do think he's still super, super committed to climate change. And you can say, unfortunately, the strongest evidence is that the climate seems to agree with me and with you. It's not a, it's still there, right? It's no longer a thing of the future, even. It's really quickly becoming reality. And I don't think we have to talk about, like in a binary sense, climate catastrophe or will the species survive. I don't think that's productive at all. The point is, it's changing. The point is, it's really easy to show. It's getting really expensive. And it's not that hard to show that having to adapt the whole planet to a much warmer climate and to restore broken ecosystems is much more expensive than fixing the problem right here and right now.
It's in the background, you would say. It's there. It's there. The
There, and
problem.
it's like I've in the past I wrote an article at one point linking the green transition and the climate crisis to COVID, because I'm like, it's kind of the same there, where people are saying, no, I don't believe in the virus. Well, look, good morning. The virus doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It's still going to affect your grandma, and she's still going to sadly pass, because the virus doesn't care, and the climate also doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It's laws of nature that are governing here. So fundamentally, Jerome, there's a massive problem we have to address. That's of course the bigger scale of things, and you can say the longer we wait, the more cost it'll get, the more it'll be a question of adaptation rather than mitigation. But honestly, the evidence I see is the problem is still there. And then I would say what we see on the advisory side, so Footprint has both and a sort of consulting advisory side that advises big corporates and late stage investors on their ESG sort of green transformation. And then we have a venture arm that I predominantly work with. But what we see there is everyone is still committed to driving this change. So it's not like people have abandoned it. People are talking about it differently. People are a little bit more cautious, maybe. Of course, a lot of money goes into AI right now, but it's not like people don't realize that this problem still needs fixing. Yeah, no, but that's for sure. But coming back to AI, you do these like YouTube analytics, and you have a lot of conversations with founders. Where do you feel the energy is moving? Like, is it hardware? We're looking also into AI for impact, regenerative materials. There's a whole host of deep climate tech things. Where do you see things moving?
For me, the top one, it's been maybe the last 2 years. I would say it's impact hardware, and the ones basically covering the basic needs, like our basic needs. Where I don't know if maybe 10 years ago, we were already talking about impact, but it was like, I love to go, but sometimes it was on, the margin of your life. If you wanted, you could buy those almost outdated products. But now we are talking about producing our electricity greener. We are talking about heating. We're talking about plastic treatment. It's basically our lives right now, but sustainably, and like producing plastic bags, like the thing we use every day, the food we produce. How can we sustain and be there in 150 years without burning? But more going like stronger on they said, the Maslow pyramid, going to eat, sleep, and drink, and going back there. And at that point, we all drink, we all eat, we all sleep. And, we need to fix those problems, housing problem, moving the food around, having healthy food. And I think we are back to this like big problem where I see company, whether on the domestic side or on the industrial side, there are people focusing on building heating system for our house, but also heating system for the industry that, the big plants that are there and that will still be existing, and try to say, let's make them less polluting. So I would say it's still there. And in the background, as you say, I would say, we've seen that AI is meant to stay. And I feel that if you use it wisely, it's going to give you an edge, because, it makes our life easier on a daily basis. So if you are smart and, you don't, you can have an edge on your competitor using a little bit of AI here and there on your daily work. So I don't see that as AI versus climate. We're gonna need to find power resources for this AI. That's another topic, but I feel like it's here to stay, and it needs to be used smartly as well by those green tech and climate tech.
Uh-huh.
But you are an investor. I'm glad to have one, and I also asked this question to August like 2 years ago. Um, and you mentioned in our conversation earlier that fundraising isn't broken, is the timing that is broken. When is actually the right moment for a founder to raise in, today 2025's market?
Yeah.
Do you have some insight to share?
Yeah, so that's a great question, right? What I meant is that the money is still largely there. I mean, some have shifted to AI, to defense, to other stuff, but mostly it has become a little bit more risk averse. So you have to understand it's not like the funds don't have the money that they used to have, and they still have to invest them, right? But so timing and calibrating your fundraise to when you can actually accommodate that sharpened risk appetite, right? So when the right proof is there, and that's a really crucial thing. You need to be much sharper on when are you actually ready to meet the bar to get the money, because the money is sort of stuck deeper in the pocket than they were. There are kind of two mindsets investors can be switching in and out of. Sometimes they're risk on, they're like deploying, they feel like they're missing out. And then there's a time when they feel like the market is kind of in an indirect sense going down. And you have this feeling like, okay, it benefits me to wait and see. So you get much more cautious. You don't want to overpay. And so the bar for getting into the conversations and finally getting the money gets higher. So you need to be sharper on, are you actually ready? The other big thing I think is you have to really think carefully about, is my burn rate, is the amount of money I'm asking for, and the pace at which I'm burning it off, is that calibrated to the risk appetite that's out there right now? And that's unfortunately always like a little bit of there's always like a bit of a crunch friction point when this market changes, because there'll be founders coming out with a sort of 2020 mindset, and then they hit this reality of investors being like, right? And I think we're midway that sort of adjustment where founders are also getting, outside of AI and other hype fields, are getting more realistic about, how to find that. And we can talk more about that later, but I think that's really, really crucial. And so I'll answer your question and shut up with my perspectives, right? But timing means only fundraise right now if you have to, right? And if you have what it takes, because it is tough out there. So I guess that's a little bit of perspective around those questions.
Yeah, and just to add back is that climate tech, where like, and I've talked to founders who were afraid that the numbers for AI, like those lovable numbers of growth are not achievable by any climate tech startup out there. And
That's not achievable by any other startup out there. It's
that's
so grossly unfair. And I even did it like the other day at our IC. I was saying against a company that someone else was bringing up. I was like, nah, but could that ever grow like 100 million AR in 8 months? And they're like, no, how many companies have done that in the history of mankind, right? Even SaaS companies never did that in the past, right? So you have to be careful. But I agree. And you do risk getting sort of speed blind that you're like, everything below that just looks kind of boring and pedestrian. And it's not, right? It's still a really good business.
true. Yeah. And it's a lot of stress, those companies. I guess, if you reach this kind of numbers so quickly, there's always a downside to.
Well, I mean, you say, well, easy come, easy go, right? And I'm not saying that, but I do think if customers can onboard that quickly, my guess is they can also churn really quickly. I'd be surprised if that wasn't the case.
But that's a good thing to remind, because I've seen a lot of founders that are like, yeah, we might stop the climate tech company even if we're like super passionate, super convinced, because we want to do something AI because nobody is gonna invest in us. I want to reassure them that no, but also if you want investment, you want fundraising, like know why you want some money.
Exactly, exactly. And
Because
we can come back to that, but I think just generally, companies across a cycle need to stay realistic about how much money you actually have access to, because there can be hype periods where you can have infinite money, but you can't calibrate your entire building journey to having free money infinitely.
it's never free, there's always somebody to respond to. If you spend somebody else's money, they're gonna say, at some point, where's my money and where's my 10x, on that.
Exactly. On that, Jerome, like you have an audience that includes like hundreds of founders at proof of concept stage. And do you have a rule for knowing when a technology is actually about to become a product? Because that is really a key step on that journey.
Yeah, and I love technology. That's why I love talking about this. And I meet so many former engineers, former researchers that have been working on that technology for years. And it's also the point where I created back in 2022 a reactor for that. Is like, technology is great, but there's a lot, like entrepreneurial life and engineer life is way different. So to answer the question is like, technology is like plastic. Plastic is a technology, but then you have like the use. The use case is like plastic bag, or like something out of it, like it's product from the technology. And so for me, what I see from, and also, the big corporates are playing that game, is the game of proof of concept. So you do the hard work in the startup, the thing they don't want to do, and they pay you very little or nothing sometimes. And that's too bad, because you go from proof of concept, I would say, to proof of customers, because if they are, that's a different kind of POC. And if my friend Christina watches this, she has a copyright. I don't know if she has the copyright, but she uses this word all the time. Is like, instead of trying to do proof of concept all the time, try
I
to
love
go
that.
for proof of customer. And I would say that, if you have a great technology and if you are out there, you can change the world, transfer your technology in some kind of value. And I don't know, it's a buzzword out there, but value, it means like, does it help somebody out there?
Mm.
Is someone ready to buy? Because otherwise it's just like a cool technological feat. I encourage like the audience to go and watch, I don't know if you know, like the Google cemetery of product, like of
Yeah,
product
I've seen that.
technology.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
And it's a good example that even Google, they already dozens of products every year, like the Google glasses like 5 years ago, and it was a bad, the bad product. But it's a good technology, but a bad product, and
Yeah.
nobody wants it. And back in 2007, when BlackBerry was leading the market for the phone, Google, they had two phones, one with the keyboard and one without the keyboard. And when the iPhone exploded, they threw away the project with the keyboard. And so, it's a good thing to remind that, usually for me, what I see in my founders, the founders that I talk every day, is like they spend a lot of time in their head just thinking about it. And I just go out there and talk, because
Totally agree.
basically you have nothing to sell.
No.
So,
How do you help them do that? Because I see my founders and the people we talk to struggle with the exact same thing, and it's the exact same advice I give. But it is easier said than done sometimes, right? So how do you coach them into doing it? What are some of the stumbling blocks that you need to help them over?
So I do, it's not directly related to being able to do it to customer, but one good exercise is go down in the streets. And if you live in a major city, that's easier. And you try to pitch your idea to a perfect stranger. Like you go in the street, you walk past somebody and you stop them. Try to explain, and they are, if you live in Paris, they're gonna be annoyed. If you live in New York, they're gonna be annoyed first. Like in the first, even you haven't opened the mouth, they're gonna be annoyed. And that's a good example because it makes your speech clear and clear. Every guy that you draw by. So that's a good good exercise to practice the clarity of your offer, because not, even if you're building a nuclear reactor right now, you want to, build heat for somebody. That's basically the end of, the end of, like, even if it's an industry or a neighborhood, you want to build heat. And that's basically this. So that's one example. The other example is just like to, go try to stop the like, I'm busy, I'm too busy, and block usually 4 hours in the morning. That's what I do, because I say you avoid having meetings in the morning and just like call 50 people. And you don't try to sell, you try to have a discussion, and you try to speak the least, but you try to guide the guy towards, what you want. But be open, because maybe you can sell the same stuff, but for a very different purpose.
Mm.
And I would say, like, try to do the rep. It's like at the gym, you do the rep, 50 calls a day or 50 mails a day. Try to go to do calls if you can, because it's better. The conversation like this one, I would say, go for trying to find those, like, in every conversation we have three things that we don't know. Let's trying to find those three secrets in every conversation. So that's the two example that I, always gave. It's free, and go use it. But yeah, I'm sure you've seen founders who they have no employees yet, but they're always busy. Like they're busy. They're too busy. But when you ask what do you do and how many customers do you meet every day, they're kind of like, I don't know. You should know.
Yeah.
You should know. You should know. And yeah, and that's also something that we'll cover after. It's about, actually, about sales. We're gonna go dive into this sales issue after. But before we go there, you are a pre-seed and seed investor, and so that's pre-revenue sometimes, and mostly all the time. So what form of, proof that convince you to invest and to go for the project? What are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, the easy answer is it depends, right? But if I'm to try to be a little bit more useful than that, then, exactly as you say, when we talk deep tech, it's generally really rare to see much revenue at pre-seed stage. We sometimes see it at seed stage. And so you can say we normally look basically for a great novel solution with a really like defensible, unique technology to a really big problem. Like that's where we start, right? And that has kind of two prongs. We have a really good understanding, being the kind of platform we are, of the size of different problems that you're tackling. If it's really early, then sometimes it's tricky because you don't even know what problem the technology will be tackling. And that's a really interesting way of entering that conversation before. How has the founder even thought about testing who this technology might be useful for? But those are the two first thing. How big is the problem this could potentially address, and how unique is this technology? Then right after that, you have to, even in deep tech, you need a really strong team. There are lots of really cool technologies with big problems that just don't have a strong enough team. And I would say you can sometimes do the trick of trying to hire a CEO, like a more commercial profile, but it is a lot harder, because somehow in 9 out of 10 cases, this hired CEO somehow just doesn't love this in the same way. Excuse me. They will tend to think of it more as a job. So we really like strong founder teams, obviously, and really like when they have a good idea of what the market looks like. When we then move to the seed stage, and I think sometimes founders who did a successful pre-seed, they misjudge how big the step up is to seed, because seed in my head means, all right, this guy or girl needs to be ready for a Series A pretty soon. And there we're talking proper commercial thinking. So I'm looking a lot for, like, okay, we need more solid technical prove at more meaningful scale. Like we can't have too much technical risk left here because you're beginning to sink in too much money and it's getting too late basically in the journey. But essentially you need a much stronger market signal. So that could be LOIs, that could be MOUs depending on the field. But the problem here is that generally, if you're a half decent salesman, like I know you are, and like many founders are, you can convince someone to give you an LOI, and it's not going to be binding. And like depending on the industry and so on, the value isn't that big. So I would be careful as a founder not to focus too much on getting like 15 LOIs with all the right logos because everyone knows that doesn't have to mean a lot. What I really look for is when I talk to those companies, those folks, are they spending time with you? Like how much are they leaning in? Are they engaging? And I'd much rather have like two or three or four high quality potential customers that
Mm.
really engage with you than I would have have 20 LOIs with all the logos I could think of because it's just not as valuable.
Yeah, engagement. Like you look for more commitment from them.
Exactly. I think if you have those things, then you have an extremely strong proposition. That's for sure. That's for sure.
Thanks. Yeah, it's very valuable.
But like Jerome, I know you coach founders to sell before you build, and I feel like you and I really very aligned around this. What's your go-to method for like a founder who's never sold anything? Then, if he's not a great salesman or
True. Yeah.
salesperson,
Yeah. But the first thing is, and you said it, that if you hire a CEO, an external CEO, he will not do like, even if it's honestly the best CEO in the world, if it's not his project, it's not gonna do a great job. And usually it's better to keep that role for you, even if you have worked on the company for years. So you better, switch your mind and try to say, if I don't sell, my startup dies. It's kind of too, sometimes I need to kick with that one because sometimes they don't realize that they're gonna sell. And sales is not just selling to customer, because you sell to your employees, you sell to your investors like you, you sell to the media. And so what I try to convince people and to educate is that sales is trying to understand the psychology of people. At the end of the day, when you go to Mr. X at company Y, the guy wants something out of this deal. He's like looking for promotions, looking for increasing pay. He's looking for more recognition on social media or on internal media. They're always looking for a reward out of it, and they are putting their name on the line as well as you are. So it will help you as a man and a woman to learn also how to sales work, because that's basically understand how motivation and motives work. So also what I found is, and especially true, and I'm French, so I can blame them, but French people, they hate salesmen because they see the doorman like knocking on doors, and they kind of like hate those like pushy sales. But hating, and I work sometimes on a psychological level where they hate so much the sales that it's hard, it's embedded in their heart and mind that the salesmen and women are bad. And that's bad, it's like, because it's what you do all the time. Even the CTO is selling, is selling to his engineer, is selling the product to the the second meeting after the CEO. So there is like the C level, they always be selling, always be closing, always be selling. And and the final thing is, just the way you learn how your technology works, learn how sales works. There's been so many books, so many podcasts, so many, online course, YouTube video now. Like you can learn how to sell from YouTube perfectly, like 100%, guaranteed, like you can learn how to sell from YouTube. So, you gotta stop hating them, and you gotta stop procrastinating the learning, because you can have an edge if you are a good talker, if you are a good, but at the end of the day, we, and I'm a salesman on the day, so I know I've learned how to do it. I have to master it, like try to master it all the time, because it's always a learning game. But at the end of the day, you need to grab a sales book and learn,
but
basics.
it's so true. And I used to think I'm going to reveal something personal about myself for a second here. I'm pretty good at talking, but I'm not nearly as good at selling, actually. And I learned this when I got a colleague who he like almost stutters, and he's not good with words, but there's something in his presence and in his approach that means he's like way better at selling than I ever was. And it's just a tiny thing to, because I think it's so important what you say, that you shouldn't confuse being like rhetorically strong with being good at selling. That can even work in your disadvantage because you come across, too pushy or too assertive. Sales is not about convincing in that sense. It's about connecting much more.
Exactly.
And you can do that in many ways.
And also, just like we said earlier, that your first goal is going to be probably very bad, and maybe the first, hundreds, with the S. So, like in the gym, when you try to do the first pull up, you couldn't lift you up. It's the same for me, I can, relate. Like, I also make a connection always to the gym. Like, if you go running the first time, you're basically going to be walking a lot, and then, going to increase the speed. And the same way in sales, the first call, but you gotta start somewhere. Everyone started somewhere. So it's the journey. It takes time. It takes years to learn. But start. Pick up the phone for the first time and do that first call. One thing that is really also interesting is usually when I see impact funders, and that's why I like them, because they are nice, but sometimes they're too nice. And so, what kind of balance between empathy and aggression, because sometimes sales is a little bit pushy, works in climate tech, as you have seen.
That's a really, really good question. Something I think a lot about. We at the Footprint firm, and I am, as all humans, we're biased, right? And I think in some sense you're especially biased when, in some sense we want to make the world a better place through the investments we do. So you tend to gravitate towards founders who are nice. And they are just not, I don't want to juxtapose the two, because I think you can be, there's nothing wrong with that. And I might add, like, many of the very best founders are indeed very, very nice. It is also possible to be a great founder and not be very nice. Maybe that's a little bit harder with some of the product categories we're talking about, but there is some tension there. I would probably push back a little bit on the aggression thing, because I think that ties into like a VC, narrative of like a very masculine trait of being that. And like some of the most like relentless and like honey badger unstoppable founders are not male, they're female, and they don't come across as in that aggressive stereotype sense. So I would more like say that you need a massive level of almost like irrational stubbornness and a lot of impatience to get going on with those 50 calls, and to stand up after you got 100 no's and just like do the same thing the morning after. Otherwise, it's damn near impossible. Can you do that and be nice? Yeah, to some extent, but you need to be able to be sort of strategically nice in the sense that you also need to then push in sort of for a greater cause, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, you need to sell at the end of the day. You need to actually pay your employees, and sometimes impact, people think it's free. It's not free. It's still a business. At the end of the day, you have a business.
Exactly. No, no, and I think this goes like right to the core of the Footprint firm's philosophy, which is there's philanthropy. I worked in philanthropy also a little bit in my past, mostly on the investment side, but I've and that's a different ball game. There you kind of give the money away, but if you want to have like what we call catalytic effect with the money we invest, it needs to be at market terms. It needs to be profitable. Then you can attract infinite amounts of capital to think to things. So, and just back to the what it takes point. It's just a funny story I wanted to share. Maybe you've already seen it, but like I read somewhere that Sam Altman, while he was at Y Combinator, he ran like a program that could do an analysis on his email exchanges with founders. He obviously had like hundreds and hundreds of founders, and he kind of grouped them in the best performing and the worst performing founders. And then he analyzed it. And what he found was like staggering in the difference between the time it took the founder to respond. So his very best founders, and these were like incredibly busy people running like unicorn, big billion dollar companies, they would respond in minutes on average. The worst performing founders, the ones that had failed and were generally struggling, on average took days to respond, right? And
Wow.
this is just really interesting. And it stuck with me because, of course, like if there's a statistician out there, you might see all kind of, embedded variables covariating and so on. But I think generally there's something about it. And we all know it when we have a founder in front of us who's just immediately responsive every time. And you just know that's a mindset thing. That means how do they treat customers? How do they go about, they make decisions, they push things forward.
Do you have a WhatsApp with all of the companies you invested in, and you You send a text and you see how many.
That's such a good idea. I'm gonna do that straight away. That's such a good idea, and then rank
It's
them
not like
accordingly.
not trying to control them, but that's you should try to make a decision and see if they connect. They make a decision fast.
Jerome, you've innovated the investment space. We're going to allocate our follow-on dollars from now on based on response time on WhatsApp. Nah, I'm
That's
kidding. I'm kidding, but I do think it is actually, and that it goes back to your point about, you can respond nicely to the email, but it takes, you can call it aggression, you can call it something else, but you need to be switched on, and it needs to feel urgent. Otherwise, you're not getting anywhere. But like, you've interviewed dozens and dozens of CEOs. Is there a personality pattern that sort of for you separates the ones who scale from those who stall?
we didn't repeat that one, but before, because we knew the question, but we didn't know the answer. But my exact answer is time to execute on an idea.
That's interesting.
So like decisiveness, and that relates a little bit to what I said, that especially tech founders, they tend to stay in their head for a long time before they act, even on a technical question. And as you said, the market is moving fast, and an idea might be obsolete in 6 months, and definitely in 3 years from now. So if you are able to, accelerate and make a proper decision, even if you have to move back away, and do say after that, like 4 months after, it was a bad idea, but what did we learn from this decision? What did why did I know back then? What information was missing for me to take the right action? And so for me, it's I'm a basketball fan, and I love Kobe Bryant, rest in peace. He had like a Mamba mentality that after a while, it was so hard to catch up with him, because when you start working out at 8 a.m., he already did one training in before you. And so even if you try to catch up with him and you start working out at 4 a.m. like him, he will still have the day before 4 a.m. training that you didn't have, and you will never catch up with him. And so at some point, all the thing that you take, and you take one day to do it, and somebody else will do it in 30 minutes, just because you give yourself like a limit to say, okay, in 30 minutes it's done. You give yourself a big edge by just proactively acting on your business. And even, I think one thing also that I hear all the time is that CEOs, they have many things to do, but at the end of the day, when you are less than 10 people, you have to sell. Like, should be like chief sales officer for a very long time. And so at the end of the day, you need to bring those people. There needs to be a flux of people entering the company, because you're gonna book some of them as customer. Good for you, but don't take too much time, actively working on them, because you forgot to fill the pipe with new ones. And this work never ends. That's also a reality that, once you sign 3 customers this year, but you need to work on 2026 now already. It's already even too late already for 2026 to get your customers. For me, yeah, time to execute on on an idea, on a plan. It's the key answer, and you can feel it, because even from exchanges, like when I have the opportunity to do an operation with a founder, and to do a podcast, and usually the ones are very assertive, very fast to design. Their business is moving fast as well. They say yes or no. Sometimes they say no, and sometimes they move back away from there. Like they say, oh, I made a mistake like 6 months ago. I thought it was not the right time, but now it's the right time. Let's go.
Can I ask you, because that's another characteristic that I think a lot about, is ability to take feedback constructively, even when it isn't always given super constructively, and yet balancing that with not like flip flopping and just running after what everyone says. No, I talked to a customer who said that, then I'm going to no, and now they say it should be 1 meters long and made out of carbon fiber. Then I'll do that. Like, how do you see and coach them on that? Because for me, that's also critical somehow in absorbing your surroundings and translating it into a course of action.
Yeah. For me, what I say is, like, everyone is going to have an opinion, from your employee to your, even your co-founders. And I like this quote I think it's from Bezos, that at any given point of time, I have like 70% of the information on something. And to reach to the 100% is going to take me so much time that I don't want to, get there. So I need to make decisions based on 70%. And I need to remind myself that everybody's pushing for their own good. So the customer A is going to tell me this, but let's think about it, because this deadline is better for him. He's trying to push away, the payment for, but it puts us in a bad situation now. So I can say no. I still, if he doesn't do this action, what are my options? I would say that you never reach the entire. You always have missing information in every situation. Have People always have opinions. Both of us, we have opinions, and usually people are, and so they will express it. Some of them. Some of them you have to find it as well. Try to go look for. Your CTO might be silent in that situation. Go see your CTO and ask what he thinks about the
Yeah.
situation. And the people who don't speak are also good to ask the question for. And then the right, like, everyone is trying to get something out of it, which is less stress. It can be just less stress. For example, the CTO might say, oh yeah, I agree with the customer, let's push the project release 3 months. And you say, yeah, but you're gonna be happy because it's less stress for you. And if they say, it's gonna be delivered in a month, you're gonna have more stress. So everyone has to win from every situation. And at the end of the day, it's all about the business. The business is super important. So that's
Yeah.
that's what I would say in this situation. But that's a great, you make hundreds of decisions as a CEO every day, and surely you never have all the information, because you cannot be in all the discussion, all the meetings and all the conversation, for sure.
No, exactly.
And yeah, you said, was something that, also always surprising sometimes for founders, because they always think that whenever you see a VC, there is always a check. You always have your checkbook open, but you are advising, and you have seen it on your newsletter. Like, if you don't need to fundraise, like, don't. Why would you say it's more relevant now? And what should founders do instead if they don't
Yeah.
fundraise?
That's a good question. I think it's especially true now, where, as mentioned, fundraising takes a long time. Like, even quality pre-seed, seed stage companies, I see a lot of them taking 6 months to close around. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of frogs that you have to go out and kiss. And it's really disruptive to build your business while you're also fundraising. So, like, unless the shows, a really nice VC shows up on your door with like a term sheet in his hand, or with, if you're running out of money right now, then I just generally think now is not the time. I think you have to be quite compartmentalized about this. Like, I actually think many deep tech cases historically focused on too much on raising too much money too early. And in a way, you can say they raise money before they've talked to enough customers. Maybe that's the KPI. How much money can you raise before you've talked to how many customers? Because it can work. You can be in that situation where you have an enticing technology that, like, oh my God, I got to be part of this. And then you can get enough money that you can sort of, get escape velocity. Really, really many deep tech companies, especially in the climate space, it kind of risks snowballing into a problem, because they've raised money and then, oh, I have to raise money at a really high valuation next time, because otherwise my investors are going to be angry. That means I have to spend more time fundraising, because all else equals, it's harder to raise on a harder. If there is 100 VCs that want to back you out there, well, if you say, hi, I'm a pre-seed company, I have a big idea of a product, and and my pre-money is 30, the number of people out of that pool who's going to end up backing you with all the singing and dancing and you can do is just very, very small. And I see it again and again and again, cases where I'm like, if you had just gone out with a little bit smaller ask, a little bit more realistic, yeah, you might have been diluted a little bit more, but you would have had 5 months back of your life to build your company. And so I think you have to be disciplined and realistic. It's back to my point before about what am I asking for? And you have to not like optimize short term for just maximum valuation and as much money as possible all the time. I can understand why people do it if it's the reverse. Some of the AI companies now, if someone shows up and says, hi, my name is Andreessen Horowitz. Would you like 300 million for 5% of your company? You're an idiot not to take it, right? I mean, that you should, but like, that's just not the case for most companies. So you have to be really disciplined. Also because, and then I promise I'll shut up, but like, deep tech in many cases is also, as you were saying, hard tech. So there's a lot of hardware tech cases in here. And often, even post maturing and reaching the right CRL level and whatnot. Even when you have a product on market, it doesn't scale like SaaS. It doesn't scale like Lovable. So like if you have to recover like, 400, 500, $1 billion invested before you even like have meaningful product market fit, you're never going to make a return for anyone. And then you have a messed up cap table and the whole thing is just a show. So it's not always true, but I do think that many. Yeah, go ahead.
One thing that you mentioned is very important. I think to come back to it is like for the 5 months that you're gonna fundraise, you're not gonna do anything else. That's a good point. And you're not gonna be in sales. You're not gonna be so. You also your business needs to survive to you being like kind of like chopped off. The company chopped off, no head, but still going. And that's sometimes they think that in sending like 5 mails a day to investor, or going to one event where like slush is going to be enough to fundraise, but that's
No, that's great. And you should always do that. And I think what I want to emphasize is you should stay in touch with investors. You should always be talking. You should always take a meeting. Well, not always, but like you should take meetings. You should stay in dialogue. And I really think the fundraising in that sense starts much earlier because I know this as a VC. The time I really like to talk to someone who has something interesting to say is when they're not necessarily fundraising right now, but just trying to understand, we're moving towards it's probably like a H1 26 or late 26, we're going to be fundraising. What would you be looking for? How do you think about something like this? And I'm like, I feel so important now. Let me tell you what I think, and I'll be telling them everything they need, and then they can use it against me, 8 months later, which is perfect.
and then you like they give you updates, like they send
Yeah,
you.
I like that. I mean, there's a lot who've started doing this like newsletter, and I actually think, well, if you don't like it, unsubscribe from it. Then they can see that no one subscribes anymore, and like, so what's the harm? And I actually think, do I always read all of those newsletters from the people that I've met? Not always, but I kind of read the headline, and it makes like cognitively, it pings it back in my head. I think it's really a no regret move to do. When I
Also,
say
it's
this, then
also
everyone
good.
will start doing it, and then.
And it's also good because if they do it like kind of publicly, it's also good, for their branding. Even outside of you and your relationship as the investor founder, you're gonna see that they evolve and they are proud of their progress online, and they try to build a brand. I have this company called Yama, it's a direct air capture in France, and they do quarterly updates on Substack, and they don't do that much because they are like very very early, but they actually work on publishing that newsletter. And some newsletters in the beginning were very technical, but still they published it, and I felt like it's a commitment that they give themselves, like, we need to publish the head of the quarter where we are, and I feel like even if I do say I don't read them all, I'm not an investor, but I kind of feel that the consistency is a good mark, that they say, okay, let's even if it's not a bad quarter, even if it's a bad quarter, let's publish. Let's say, we struggled with the technology, we struggled with the customer, we struggled with X, Y, and Z. I feel like it's more like a living adventure that I can follow on social media. And if I want to dive deeper, that's what I did, because I did some videos about direct air capture. I found that was good because at the at those early stages of pre-seed seed, how many startups speak publicly? Yeah, that you can count them with your hands, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, that's too bad, but yeah, that's another whole other topic.
Yeah, it is. It is. But switching back to like sales and connecting it a little bit, you often say that like data beats hope in sales. Are there like three metrics that every early stage founder should track weekly to stay sort of investor ready with how these things develop?
So yeah, I like to say it's the three markers is volume. So I go to the bottom. Volume, interest, commitment. So volume is like how many leads did you reach out? Like how many liters of leads do you put in your sink every day? Every day, like basically, because even if for example it doesn't bring anyone second stage. If you tell me for the last 3 months you've been contacting 50 people a day, I'm gonna tell myself, okay, this guy is motivated. Like he will find something because he's onto something. Maybe he hasn't found his niche, but this is digging. The guy keeps digging. Like Dory said, just keep swimming. It's like this. So then after a while, some of those leads will convert into meetings, which I call interest. So volume, from volume to interest. That doesn't mean that they will buy, but still, those people are ready to give you one of their most precious thing, which is time. And if somebody is ready to give you time where they don't know you, they haven't seen you, never seen you in your life, for me, that's the first time they pay you. So you should consider that they pay you in time. And the final thing, and how many, I would say, letter of intent, because I'm talking seed pre-seed, it's the commitment. How many, commitment, what are they ready to do with you? What kind of like proof of concept, or proof of customer project are they ready to do with you, or letter of intent, or even buy from your whole finished product. And so those three metrics are not too heavy, because you're gonna say, okay, week one, quarter one, you're gonna call 50 people, get no meetings, no letters, and let's say 1 month from now you get 50 calls a day, 5 meetings, zero commitment. Third month, 50 calls a day, 10 meetings, one commitment, and then you see you see progress. You continue filling in the pipe, and after a year, there's so many calls. 50 calls a day. Even if you take days off, like 200 days, working days every year, so that's like 10,000 calls. So you get there. If you do it, you get there. So that's the three things I give early stage founders, because I don't want to bring you the whole conversation how to, close the closing framework and everything. Like, do some volume, raise some interest, and try to then make them commit to the point. That's, three metrics that I give them, and are easy to find and easy to fill in a piece of paper every day.
It's a really also strong framework for how you should, you know, track your own time almost, right? And back to your sort of set a calendar, block, call 50 people, but it just tells you, and it is this thing like what gets measured gets done, right? And you need to force yourself to measure exactly the kind of progress you want to see. So it makes really good sense. I like that framework.
If you let's not talk about problem anymore, but let's talk about victory. But what company that you've seen and you've backed in the past would you back again, and what can you tell us what they did right, and between the time before you invested and until now?
Yeah. I mean, we backed one. It's a funny story where like they came really early to us, and I think our company wasn't quite ready yet. And then they came back at like seed stage, and we were ready. They were also had also gotten much better, so the valuation had climbed quite a bit. But we sort of backed them at seed, and they are just about to close their Series A. So touch wood, and I hope I'm not jinxing anything here. It's a company called Cassia. So they do like a biofuel. It's basically like a phenomenal technology that can convert like various biomass sources into a drop-in ready quality marine fuel. So it's kind of, changed the fuel, not the engine. You can like make a green transition on ships without the whole sort of changing the whole fleet. And I would say like it's just a company that matured massively in several ways. They did a couple of things if I'm to sort of try to unpack it a little bit. They have a strong founder, but they added just the right senior competencies,
Okay.
giving them sort of direction and momentum and credibility with partners. Because if you are a deep tech person and you're going into like a very established heavy industry like the oil industry, for instance, it can help to get that right person who comes from the other side in, and they got this guy in just at the right time, and it sort of just sharpened everything. And I would say generally the company just matured massively. They matured their first of a kind plant sort of steps. So they got all the siting permissions. They got like a really strong, well developed engineering plan. All the big pieces were just there, and so they were ready, right? And I would say also from the outside, even though they've always been good at presenting the story, they really honed it, and they matured, so it like presented itself, from really good to just like world class. You feel it when you get a pitch in your hand, or when you see someone on stage, that this is polished. And so it's not one thing, but it's kind of getting your house in order, and recognizing that's really something I want to leave many founders with. Don't commit the fallacy of thinking that what made you succeed at pre-seed is going to make you succeed at seed, and what's cut the mustard at seed is going to make you successful in Series A, because it amplifies. Like, imagine your valuation expectation as a VC. You want to see like a next step up, preferably even more from round to round. Well, look, that takes a lot from the company to deliver that. You need to be twice as good at everything almost, right? And I really sometimes see people underestimate the level of maturity you need to get in those sort of 12, 18, 24 months.
And that's amazing because they recognized that they were missing this oil and gas, knowledge of the industry. They say, let's not, be blindfolded and not look at it right now. And they say, we're going to make it and try to make out for those like 30 years, man. I don't know how many years these senior executive had in the industry, but they give themselves an edge by hiring him. And also they were very humble, saying that we couldn't know, like we can't know what this guy had in his mind. And we're gonna, more than the network, is also maybe recognizing that just, we don't have the skills, like we don't have the network, the experience that this guy has. And that was very humble, because it's hard to recognize that you missed something, to go from pre-seed to seed or seed to Series A, and try to be like, okay, we are a new player in a big fish, a big pond, and surrounded by big fishes, and we're gonna need to be recognized as serious, because that's the three stages. Because very well, because you're VC. Every time there's something happening that's new, it's ridicule first. Then when it stays, it starts to be dangerous for the existing players, and then it's obvious, like too good to go, this application to get the food. Maybe for some people at first it was ridiculous to get almost expired food, and then it became dangerous for the big chains, that this was a really attractive offer for the consumer, and then they say, okay, let's adopt it. Otherwise the competitor are gonna adopt it. And that's you need to survive those stages. They are different. They are very, very different.
Yeah, I totally agree. And as you mature, as you near Series A, you know, it really gets real. And you need to come across as someone who can actually like manage a really large company. You need, sloppy financial models and half-baked assumptions. Just won't cut it at that stage. You can say, in a way, I always say, like, at Series A, you need hope. Like, you usually say hope is not a strategy. You say hope is not a sales approach, and so on. But like, there is hope in a lot of early stage building of companies. You can't know it all. You are hoping, but it does cease to be a strategy when you reach Series A. You need proof. Like, otherwise you're just not getting anywhere. And that, I think, founders just need to recognize.
I like it. Hope, from hope to proof.
From hope to proof, and or at least like justifying that it's not unreasonable and so on and so forth. Proof is always is debatable, right? But
Yeah.
you mentioned Gentlemen's earlier, in our conversation. What made their model stand out as like a hard tech idea that really managed to scale revenue?
So for our audience that are listening, Genomind is this company, this climate tech company that are able to extract the nickel from the plants. So
Yeah.
the mining industry, it's a disaster, for the environment, and also it's a very intensive industry. So their idea is to, instead of us digging, that we plant those new plants, genetically modified plant that actually absorb the nickel, and then you cut the tree and you burn the tree and you get the nickel. And actually, I knew this company from 2022, basically the moment I created Reactor, a little more, maybe 6 months before even creating them, and I've been following them for a long time. And yeah, a few weeks back, they raised $45 million in a huge Series A. And I was like, okay, I need to dive into this business model. And, I dived into the numbers and the amount of money that it cost to actually mine for nickel. And it's crazy, like it's crazy $1 billion operations. And it's supporting their value as a company. So they say, we're going to plant plants, so our trees, in a location where if you do it with your existing facilities, existing means, it's going to cost you billions of dollars. So even if the R&D is not, fully ready and it's going to scale for a long time, it's going to need some time to also scale in production. They compared what they could do at what cost to the existing industry, and they to a point where it was like 100 times better. And this is the big number. I don't know if it's 100 times, like more
Doesn't
than,
matter.
you
Big
know,
number.
it's more than 10 times. And that's justify the entire product and, company. That's, this even more, we usually say that we need 10 times or 20 times. But here it's like the number is crazy because the industry today is crazy. And also they actually showed that the interest for climate tech and for actually hard tech in climate is real and still going. And as we said earlier, that we are trying to make the same. So we're trying to live a little bit like we live today, but in a sustainable way. And we're not trying to stop mining, as you say. The biofuel company, they're trying to fit in existing engines. They don't try to replace the car and say we have a big assumption that tomorrow every boat on the planet is gonna need to change their engine. That's illogical. Like no one is gonna believe this. It's too hard of an assumption. And so same for Genomine, they say let's keep the existing needs and the growing needs for natural resources, and based on that we can expect that our model is going to grow, and our model is going to be ready, and our plants are going to be ready. And mining is terrible for the environment, and so we have a market, and they showed that to the investor. And now they're going from series A, so from hope to actually actions, let's say. And I'm glad they do, because it's funny because they are CEO and CTO. He was in mining and she was in bioengineering, and they met at Entrepreneur First. And they when they saw each other, they started talking to each other. Like they apparently found the idea like this because they knew a little bit of the scheme, and when they combined it, that was like, okay, can we actually do that? Let's just try to grow some nickel. And it's amazing because they have, it's almost like by the book. It's a climate tech example, and I'll cover that in the next few weeks for Reactor, and hopefully I will get an interview with them because it's an amazing company.
Yeah, sounds really cool. I'll
Yeah,
have to look into that.
yeah, you will. I will send it to you.
You should.
You when we prepared, you mentioned a company, and this mycelium company
Mhm.
startup that you backed, and an interesting pivot that they did from asphalt to tiles. Can you give us a little more details
Yeah,
about
for sure. No,
this?
I love that startup. We actually didn't bag it, and it was
Okay.
because they pivoted, and now we might. But so this is exactly my emotional story with this lovely startup. It's called Visibuild. The
Okay.
founder, Line, she's phenomenal. Like she's one of those that you meet every now and then that can just like make a startup out of nothing. She started herself, and she's basically developed a mycelium that can replace what's called bitumen, so the sort of black, oily, sticky stuff that binds gravel together in asphalt, and that's really polluting, and it kind of relies on oil. The fossil, traditional oil to be extracted and processed, so it's harmful in every way. And she's made great sort of progress towards applying this for actual road construction, which is like her vision still. But it became clear that the specs to get there were like really challenging because roads are huge projects. And unless you could sort of prove that this will last for like 50 years and resist weather, it was hard commercially to get, it was easy to get someone engaged in the process, but it was hard to get them to commit to sort of commercial offtake in that sense. And so, she gets this idea of literally chopping up the problem into smaller pieces and making tiles instead. And, she did a really successful launch event. She had like, representatives of government, and everyone loves this idea. It looks beautiful. And all of a sudden you just realize this is what mycelium can do. It's so close to its natural habitat among many other things. And so it's modular now. She can go to market in many more ways, in much smaller batches, which already means she can get a lot of scale and a lot of recognition or like brand recognition out there. And she learns a ton in that process. So I think for me, that's like a textbook example of how you push a great solution towards a tricky problem. Like literally, you chop it up bit by bit and then lay it out in
Nice.
piece by piece. We
Wow.
we haven't invested. We might at some point, but we followed her really closely for years, and I really think she's a force of nature. So like, but when you profile companies, what are the signals that tell you that a startup story will resonate with with investors and with the public, you can see this one really resonated with me, right? I got
Yeah,
all
exactly.
animated.
And I will take, I have two traits that, I try to match when I interview someone. I say, will make a great story for my reactor audiences. The first one is actually the commitment. And, I don't know about, what's her name again? You said?
Line?
Is she's gonna do it with or without us? Probably yes. It's more like, do you want to tag along yourself, like media, investor, customer? Because no matter what, she's gonna wake up tomorrow and do it again. And
Exactly right.
yeah, it's that was a perfect transition, because that's something that you can almost feel like they will not stop, and even if they are wrong, and maybe you say asphalt is hard, it's hard to go the industry, but they will find out, they will find a way. They cut the problem in tiles, and she found a way. But it might take years, but at the end of the day, she will still wake up and try to solve it. And even tomorrow, if she had to shut the company down, she did put her heart out for this, and she will try something else, and she will succeed, because she's on the path. And the second one is usually the story behind the startup. What I like about, that's why climate tech and deep tech had in common before. Usually the startup started years before it was incorporated. There's always like the guy working on a lab, working in his garage. Like, I have an idea and it's crazy, but should I start it? And then you offer it internally and nobody believes in it. And you say, maybe I should do it myself. And then there's finding the right co-founder, whether inside the lab or outside, it depends. Our stories are always different. And then there is some kind of alchemy, some kind of science synergy between those two founders or three founders, some kind of like backstory, and say like they deeply love each other because they basically spend their day together. And I love, this is when I look at the parts that people watch on my videos, they watch more this part than the technology part. They love like saying that those guys met in a lab, and at some point there was nothing, and now they hire 50 people, and it's something that's crazy.
People follow people. They don't fall in love with technology. So that's interesting. But it's the people connected to the technology that makes you vibrate somehow. I totally agree with that.
Yeah, so that was that's it's always moments that people love, and I will never undervalue that part in my interview, because even when I watch, for me, Diary of a CEO, this kind of like high level podcast, I love the story of the human. And that's why you know usually when you do something, you are a good example. You suffered it or you survived it. And I did all the mistakes of like sticking to my product 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. And I was an engineer pretending to be an entrepreneur, and so I know all those bad, like not talking to customer, not advertising, saying that customer will walk through my door whenever my product is ready magically. And so and that's never, that I did all the mistakes and I failed. I always say that I successfully crashed my company. It's what led me to Reactor then, and what enables me to actually talk to those people today. And then they say, I know what you feel. Sometimes now I've never reached the point they are at, because I see them and I failed before. But the early step, I did it. I do it. I know, I recognize it. And something that I always advise, and maybe you're gonna say it's wrong, Jerome, but I always say that the first market should be your local market, and then the second market should be the US. If you want to be a global company, that's being said. If you want to build a local company, and I have nothing again like local, it's sometimes it's great. It's a great model. Between Europe and US, where do you see that Europe actually winning in climate tech compared to the US right now?
No, it's such a good question. Let me try to unpack it a little bit how I think about it. But this can be a long debate, right? I think Europe benefits largely. It benefits from a policy framework that's relatively consistent, that's relatively long term and oriented. And I promise I'll get down to some actual like startups and so on. But like it has that stability, and it's oriented towards like demand side mandates. So like the Fit for 55 package under the European Commission sets binding targets and performance standards and so on, rather than just sort of putting big subsidies up front, which was like the Biden administration approach and so on. And so for me, that gives fundamentally climate tech firms more certainty about the markets they're building into. Then they have shown the EU their willingness to change regulation and walk back some of these commitments. And that's really tricky when you do that. But I think generally still, those signals like mandated share of aviation, sustainable aviation fuel, mandates for grid decarbonization, building renovation targets, a lot of those things are really helpful to build in Europe. I also think that Europe does in some areas really have serious science and innovation depth. Like we have some really strong research ecosystems. So I think we're building on that. And then I do think some of the systemic industries that are sort of hard to abate are actually strong in Europe, like cement and steel and chemicals, some of the old good like German industries, and we are moving relatively aggressively in that direction via, regulation, carbon markets, and so on. So I do think actually we have for some of those, startups in that direction, I do think we have a lot of the ingredients to cook up a really nice dish. But the big caveat here is, of course, the US leads because they have scale in venture capital. They have a dexterity in risk taking that I think we lack. We're committing, like if you read up on like the history of venture capital, there's this fundamental question, which is why did it emerge on the West Coast and not on the East Coast? Because most of the universities and all the money was on the East Coast, right? And the explanation that's sort of typically given is that they had this old school investor like mindset, whereas
in the
the
valley.
West Coast folks were entrepreneurs. They were adventurers. They ventured in and they threw money at it, and they were willing to take these moonshots, and they were willing to share upside with the founder if it succeeded. So they were focused more on those things. And I see a European VC community that's learning, but that's still stuck in that sort of old like finance mindset too much. And as long as US has like way bigger pools of VC and scale up, they're gonna tend to win in most categories. Like I don't know, I don't know if they're from around your neck of the woods. Kingly, a software
Yeah, no.
company, getting pretty successful in something that we have a B2B sort of enterprise software history in Europe, and they seem to be sort of nearing cracking. How do you get scale and velocity in one of those categories in a green field? And I hope to see more of that. H2 Green Steel could be another example. That's like a traditional steel European industry that we are sort of mostly, I would say, the US is proving that they're winning, right? And we haven't quite proven it yet, especially at the scale up stage. I think we have
Yeah,
a good ecosystem for like the early stage part, but I think as long as you lack that later stage capital and a more like nimble IPO market and ability to get liquidity for early investors, we're always going to be a little bit behind.
yeah. Do you think there is a change? Like, do you think it's changing, or do you think it's still a topic that we don't want to talk about? I don't
I
know
think
if
it is
maybe it's
changing.
too
I
much in
think
the power of too is too high for us.
No, 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 no. I think it is changing. I think the EU together with some private investors, including a few Danish ones that I know well, the Danish Sovereign Fund and my former employer Novo Holdings, launched sort of a scale up fund for like deep tech, sizable commitment to that. I feel like it's very much on the radar everywhere that this is something we need to fix. But I do think there is a problem that the EU comes from a very bureaucratic regulating mindset, and it has advantages, but it's also exactly detrimental to the kind of conditions you need to create. And so it is a little bit laughable almost sometimes. You could almost make a joke out of like two bureaucrats walk into a bar and then they start talking about how they're going to make a startup, and they begin to make rules of how I'm inventing this joke as we speak. Maybe it'll end horribly, but you know what I mean? It's a little bit sometimes like, blind people talking about colors. All respect to blind, visibly impaired people. But I do feel that we need to be a little bit harder on ourselves there, and we do need to catch up. I think a lot of people are on the topic, but I'm not sure we're doing enough yet.
I don't know if you know the story and you know those facts, but and I don't want to also encourage people to act illegally. But basically, Uber and Airbnb, when they started in Europe, they were kind of illegal where they came, because they were like disrupting both the taxi industry and on the one side in the hotel industry, and they didn't ask for permission. They were looking for market interest. Like they say, let's penetrate the French market, the Danish market, the UK market, and they ask for permission after. They say, "Okay, people are booking taxi with our application, and people are booking stays at our hotel, and we have people ready to rent." And so sometimes we miss, as you say, we miss that crazy founder.
Yeah, I think general it's like it's you can't have it all, right? And I think we have a lot of other things that I think many Americans will envy.
Yeah.
And I do think that the EU bureaucracy is also doing a lot of good. I sometimes walk around sort of saying there is no green transition without like international rule of law and without like a level playing field. If it's just like there are certain pockets that you can green, but you need a level playing field for a lot of these technologies to become so I'm not about to bash someone who actually does probably on a global scale the biggest legitimate attempt to create a rules-based system and like a legitimate, transparent, regulated playing field. But it just comes at the expense that you can't regulate your way to an innovation breakthrough, right? I mean, you can regulate an innovation breakthrough, but
Because the innovation is out of the path. It's
it's
innovative. That's
exactly.
and if you try to, as you say, compress it or put rules and bars, it's not innovative anymore.
No, and I think like back to your point about the deep tech founder who should venture out of his or her lab and talk to a customer. I sometimes laugh almost, when bureaucrats meet up at conferences and discuss how do we deregulate. I'm like, stop regulate. I mean, it's like, so, but it's really easy to hit, or to point at bureaucracy. I really think largely it is a good thing. I think it's too cheap, but I just want to say that will need to we find a way to get energy and more risk willingness and more nimbleness into startups if we want to catch up on innovation. And I think people are realizing we need that in order to stay competitive. That was like the core of the Draghi report that came out a year ago.
Otherwise, most of the founders, I don't know about Danish, but in France, now there is a big also topic about a tax for the super rich founders, that they need to pay dividends, pay taxes based on the shares they have. So there is a debate on LinkedIn where you should live, whether you should leave France or not for that, and that's actually a big debate because we've seen some founders actually leave.
Yeah, and like you're a French a founder, and you have a global audience. How do you think European startups can learn to go global faster without maybe migrating, but sell and stay here and be successful from here? How do you coach them on that?
Yeah, it's actually good because the good question because for the ones who knows, like who has been for the people who have been following free for more than 2 years now. It's I started in English first. A lot of people told me like your LinkedIn is in English, is in French, everything, and I switched to English, and I switched my LinkedIn as well to English, and it was a big step, and everybody was like, you are missing out on all this available market to you. But I say, yeah, that's exactly what I want to prove, is that you always start at the beginning, and then you need to start this ramp that's gonna be maybe long, maybe short, I don't know, and then you will kickstart. But the thing is, for example, for me, I would say one advice is super basic, is start writing in English,
Yeah.
or at least double language, Danish in English, or French in English, German in English, because uh, what I see is whenever you say I'm gonna go international, in everything is in Danish or French, it's too late. It's like you're invested. Like you are, if you look at Reactor and everything was in French, maybe we wouldn't be here now because you
My
are able.
French is really poor, unfortunately.
Yeah, but and if you're if the Impact Investor newsletter was in Danish, I would never have read it. That's something that that's basic, but that's one on one is right in English, and it's gonna be bad maybe. So take some classes. I've seen founders who are 50 years old, they take classes, and that's okay. That's part of the journey and something you can learn. The second thing is start now. It's like investment. The good time to start investing was 20 years from now, but it's also now, because if you haven't started, let's start. And also you need to knock, as I said before, you need to knock those two stages first. Like, this idea is ridiculous, and this idea is dangerous, and then you want to go fast to the obvious. But by starting later, you're gonna be, growing bigger. You're gonna be bigger. Hopefully, you're gonna be bigger, because sometimes also doing marketing activities, and branding is also bringing you inbound leads that can help your business. So, and also one thing that I tell my founders, and they always laugh, is you don't do enough marketing if you haven't pissed somebody by 12 p.m. And that's a good example. You're always gonna be pissing somebody, and it can be your friend. I've heard, and I still hear a lot of friends from me who say, "Jerome, you post too much." I was like, "Jerome, you're too much on the internet." I was like, "Yeah, but I'm still not, big enough to make an impact as I want, to do."
Yeah.
And there are so many founders out there are still invisible that I want to highlight. So too bad.
But it's true, and I have a startup in my portfolio, and it's something I got to work on. That consistently they post stuff and they do it consistently, and they get like 10 likes, 12 likes on LinkedIn. And I'm not about to say that the world should run on likes, but if that's all you get, like a couple of years in, you got to do something different, man. It's like you just not you're not or stop doing it, do something else. Like
Yeah, but the thing, if they are, so smart enough to say, "Oh, this one is like 10, 10, 10, 50. Okay, let's double down on the 50." And what do we do? Do we do with the 50? And then also the likes are good, but they also know about the impression. Because at the end of the day, when I see a post that has 20,000 impression, I say 20,000, it's like a full stadium full of people. And sometimes you need just, for example, for someone to see Reactor right now, or see Impact Supporter, or Footprint Firm right now, and then it will grow in their head. And 2 years from now, they're gonna buy something for you. They're gonna remember, okay, Jonas is investing in climate tech, and I started my company in the meantime. So I remember, and you never know about this, like, small seed that you planted in your head. So start now. And also one thing that you mentioned, and Europe, US is always a battle, is don't fear ambition. That's what I feel in Europe we are lacking. Is like, if you are going global, don't fear it. There's, well, there's no problem to say that I want to go global Reactor. I've done the interviews in English, and it's also been a struggle for me, because always getting better in English, always getting stronger in written English as well. But the problem is global. Climate change is global, and
yeah.
that's why I go global. So I would say there's no incompatibility. And also, don't be afraid to be a Danish guy and in a cave in a garage, and they say, "Yeah, I'm gonna be the next Jeff Bezos of climate." Go, please do. I'm looking for you, and I back you up. For like European founders with ambition, Indian people with ambition, let's go. And especially if you have a impact heart, that's even better.
I totally agree.
So that's that for me. The ambition part, as you said, we need to be like more ambition, more risk adverse, and that's something that I'm trying to push people to say. Okay, you want to 50% of the market? Let's go.
Yeah.
I tend to not contradict people. Say, "Oh, you want 10%? Let's do 50." I want to go and push them to overachieve than underachieve. Because if you set the target, and the higher the bar, the higher you will land. So that's what I say.
That's true.
When we talked, I felt that you were a big Harry Stebbing fan. So you said you wanted 10% Harry Stebbing energy in your Impact Supporter and newsletter.
Yeah,
What,
that's
what
true.
does that
No,
mean? What
yeah,
does that
no.
mean?
What did I mean about that? Look, I really love his shows. Like, I think he's a. I'm almost going to call him a generational podcaster, and also a great investor, evidently. But he makes me feel old and slow, and I love that. Like, I love that. I would have said, yeah, I want 20%, but like I'm approaching 40, so I'm going to aim for 10. That was the best I could hope for. Joking aside, I mean, I think they've defined a fast-paced way of tackling like really complex, important content in a way that's really engaging, even for people who are not in the core. So they're like very clearly, and he's very clearly talking. He has his 1,000, listeners firmly in mind, and he's talking to them, but he's doing it in an energetic and optimistic style that I think engages a much broader audience. And the stuff we work on, the climate change, it really needs people to engage not only in the problem, but really also in the solutions. And so if I can bring just like a tiny bit of that energy and momentum into our podcast and draw in an audience to be engaged in what are all these exciting solutions that are out there, how do we tackle some of these problems, then I'd be delighted. Um, I mean, specifically, Harry has been beating up the climate tech VC space, saying that the best talent doesn't want to build there. And I can see, like, with the pace that's going on in like generative AI and around that whole shift, he might have a point, but I'm really keen to prove him wrong. Like, I really want to show that we can build some really phenomenal startups here, and I want to tell those stories. I want to bring those stories to everyone in these podcasts.
And keep the show evolving with those, because 5 years from now, the newsletter and the podcast is going to be much different from today, and you want to keep some kind of like evolution on the table. Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. Nah, it's for sure. But like in terms of expanding, Reactors reach it also keeps expanding. India, US, Germany. How can sort of content creators like us better, I guess, cross pollinate audience? I guess we can talk like we do here, but
Yeah, we talked about it. Like AI is also going to disrupt our world. The content creator. So I would say that the keep the human touch, because when I try to think about something that will never disappear, and I fear, because today I watched someone said that they got interviewed it was on the TV, French TV, that they fell in love with AI, because AI was, there's a really like an application where you can program somebody to say I love you and everything. So that was scary. But the other things that it's like the stories that we build, like the poetry, that you like the art of people. And I feel like what we are trying to do and what people like is there is always a human touch behind it. So even if we're talking about climate, and even if Impact Supporter and Reactor goes in different directions in the future or slightly apart, I feel that what is important is that we keep this human among the noise, slash the noise, and slash the AI bubble that will obviously overflow us in the next 5 years. Also, share startup, but that's one I think I do. And I have a few newsletters that I recommend. One of them is yours. Is like, sometimes I get VCs that send me, you know, they found I interview. So it's a good bargain. I feel like collaboration in this business, in this climate tech is important. I'm part of like several communities around climate, and let's try to use this. Like, people are nice, and so they want to give you, they want to go the extra mile to help you on your journey. For you, it's growing the VC brand and the visibility. But for me, it's more like the more people see my interviews, the more even the old interviews that I did in the past are more popular. So it's, everyone is benefiting from those kind of exchanges. So let's try to use the best of out of everybody. I try to be, for me, let's say my area of genius is like trying to reach people and make connections. And some people call me like El Conector. So that's funny. Because they say, oh, maybe Jerome knows that guy. It's like, yeah, I do. And so it's funny. It's funny because it's, for me, it's free. And like, you ask me, Jerome, can you? Yeah, I see you're connected on LinkedIn to this guy. Can you make an introduction? It costs me nothing, and maybe for you, game changer. And I feel like we need to use this collaboration, keep the human touch, and that's what I will continue doing. And and those interviews with founders, because that's what people love and what I love. And also use the whole area of genius of everybody. You invest, you are great at investing, I'm great at interviewing. So let's keep our best interest in mind, and best area of geniuses. One final note, because already 1 hour and 30 minutes, I knew it was going to be long. But if you have one final advice for a founder watching us, what would it be?
quit and find a job. Nah, I'm kidding. I do think, like, I'll be brief about it, but like I always think about, the other day I saw a post from someone. He was talking about what he called venture tourists, like people coming from like corporate or consulting, and they were looking for this inspiring and flexible and relaxed working experience. And he was like, they rarely last. And I've seen this too, because startups aren't calmer, and they are way messier, louder, more personal, and they're also normally more stressful. So I think every founder who's sort of setting out on this journey should ask themselves, like, am I up for the challenge of this? Am I looking for a challenge? Because if I'm just looking for an experience, then well, be my guest, but you could be in for a rough ride. You shouldn't underestimate what it takes. But if you feel like this tickle in your stomach that you're like, I think I want to throw myself into this, then you should totally do it. You should totally do it. But you need to do it for the right reason.
Yeah, because you need to do it when when it's sunny, but also when it's raining.
Exactly. Exactly. And
It's
it's
gonna be
this
hard.
it will be hard, and the hard part is not getting the cool idea and drawing up the vision in different colors, and the hard part is when it's just not working and you're not getting anywhere and you disappointed someone. And then I would say probably the other thing and is like really choose carefully who you venture with, right? I mean, who you select as your wing person, co-founder, who do you hire in the beginning? It's so crucial because like a lot of really good startups just lose momentum because of people issues, and like thinking carefully about that and really putting a lot of effort into being value aligned with the people. And I think really, if I've learned one thing in my nearly 40-year career, is go for slope and not for y-intercept. And it's been said a lot, but it's really true. There are cases where you just need to hire a senior really smart person to like crack open a door or bring some knowledge to the table, but generally go for the value aligned, really like plastic minds that can grow with you, because you're going to have to grow and you don't know where.
Wow, that's a yeah, very valuable advice. Yeah, and that's those are the ones that we don't see much often. Everybody say higher, low, junior profile, but sometimes a senior is the best move.
But you have to really know the game you're going to be playing then, and I think typically that makes sense when you're pretty locked on where you're building towards. But what about yourself? Do you have a final piece of advice to every investor watching? What would you say?
So yeah, to the investor, I see them because on Substack you can see the email address. So I see what the point VC a lot. So I know like partners VC. I see them. They are following. So in not unsubscribing. So it's pretty cool. Yeah. So my thing is like I'm doing my best to educate the next gen of climate tech founders, and there are like super gems, like out there. They might need some more coaching or some more education, but they are like super motivated, hard skill climate tech entrepreneur to back. So keep following me. I won't stop tomorrow, and I will keep trying to push for those companies to be visible. That's my ultimate goal. Is I don't have a number to tell you like 10,000 and 1 million. I don't want to put numbers. I think there is always one to find. And one day I got a call from a guy from Ghana who was like doing a small climate tech on his own in Ghana, and one for Bhutan. And I was like, wow, that's great. If I can reach Bhutan, that's great. And so I felt like there's no limit because everyone can work on those problems. It's always good for the planet. So there are some like very hard skilled people out there. So I'll keep my best to find them and highlight them the best I can. So keep following.
Super cool.
Cool. Thank you, Jonas, for the conversation. I think we're gonna wrap it up here, and when we're gonna talk soon.
For
Uh, for
sure.
those for those who missed the live, we're gonna record and replay after that. But thank you for the conversation, and talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Jerome. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.